It's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Aruna Dontabhaktuni. Dr. Aruna Dontabhaktuni is the CEO and founder of PharmaPro Consulting. She's also the founder of and scientific director of Project Dontabhaktuni that offers clinical pharmacology and pharmacokinetics training to students in different countries. She is the chair of the International Society of Pharmacometrics, ISOP, local group, and the chair of ASCPT, the biologics community. Dr. Dontabhaktuni has received multiple awards for different from different companies for her scientific contributions. She is a recognized thought leader in clinical pharmacology and regulatory affairs, and has been invited as a speaker at the national and international conferences. Her interactions with the FDA has been extensive, and she has led to the approval of many therapeutic agents. She got her PhD from Long Island University, Arnold Mary Schwartz College of Pharmacy, from where I also graduated. Dr. Aruna Dontabhaktuni will be highlighting the current and emerging trends in drug development and regulatory submissions. I can go on and on, but in the interest of time, I'll stop here, Aruna, and then I'll let you take the lead in talking about your presentation. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you for the invite here. Really appreciate this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts and from my experiences in drug development and the regulatory submissions. I hope you can see my screen now. So yeah, today I'm going to be covering about drug development, regulatory submissions, the current status, and emerging trends. So the outline of today's presentation would cover what the FDA or the United States Food and Drug Administration consists of, what are the various divisions within the FDA, what is the drug approval process, and the various phases of drug development. Following this, we will actually talk about the emerging trends, which is, I'm going to give you some idea about the various expedited testing and approvals. We will briefly cover the FDA's emergency use authorization, because all of us have heard about it since we are in the, I would say maybe the fag end of the pandemic, but we have heard about this, in news number of times. So I'm going to cover about that, and then talk about, in particular, cover the breakthrough therapy designation and how is that an advantage over the regular approvals. And we will cover a few case studies and some data. Again, feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions and or need any clarification. I would love for this interaction to be a two-way interaction. So yeah, now talking about the FDA. So what is the FDA or United States Food and Drug Administration? So the US FDA consists of 7 centers. And these 7 centers and their responsibility is to ensure safety, efficacy, and oversight of nation's human and veterinary drugs, tobacco products, biological products, medical devices, food, cosmetics, and other products that emit radiation. And the 7 centers are as defined here in the slides. However, the two centers which are of primary importance for us are the centers for drug evaluation and research and the Center for Biological Evaluation and Research. So now let's take a deeper dive into the drug discovery and approval process. Starting from the preclinical or the discovery phase. In this case, the drug sponsor and or the pharmaceutical companies are responsible here, but that they would identify the appropriate drug candidates and then move that forward. In fact, further through the presentation, I would even cover what does it really take to go through the various phases of drug development. So here the sponsor would identify a drug candidate and move that along through the discovery phase. And before they move into doing further testing, the sponsor would also need to get approval from the FDA, which is actually shown in the IND application. So prior to the IND application, the sponsor would do some benchtop research and also conduct some preclinical testing, also known as animal testing, which could happen in one animal or multiple different species of animals, wherein the focus is identifying the toxicity and safety profile of the drug. Following that, as I had mentioned earlier, that the sponsor would go to the FDA, submit an IND application, also known as the investigational new drug application, and post approval from the FDA, the sponsor would move into phase 1 testing. The phase 1 of drug development, the primary emphasis of the clinical trial, the phase 1 clinical trial, is the safety of the medication. And in this case, the sponsor might also look at what are the side effects, how do the drug gets metabolized and eliminated, also known as the absorption, metabolism, distribution, and elimination process of the drug. And typically, a phase 1 is conducted in healthy volunteers. It could range anywhere from 20 to 80 subjects. Post this, the drug would move to a phase 2, in which case the focus is to look at the efficacy of the medication. And in this case, we're looking at patients majority of the times, and you're looking at about hundreds or so of patients enrolled in each of these trials. Post the phase 2, the sponsor would have an interaction with the FDA before they move into phase 3. Again, you might hear about phase 2A and phase 2B meeting, etc. And that's what that refers to. Following that, post the discussions with the FDA, and if the FDA gives a go-ahead, the drug would be moved to a phase 3 of drug development, in which case you're looking typically about thousands of patients and or subjects being enrolled into this trial. And the focus here is to look at the safety and the efficacy of the drug substance here. So following phase 3, the sponsor would actually submit an application to the FDA to get an approval for the drug. And this case, we're looking at a new drug application. In case you're looking at a small molecule, then it is referred to as a new drug application. In case of a biologic, it is called as a biologic biologic licensing application or a BLA application. The FDA would meet the sponsor, review all of the data that is submitted by the sponsor, and give an approval of the drug and or deny and or request for additional information. Post the approval, and here we are also talking about what is the application review process. The FDA would take about 60 days to accept the NDA for review. And once accepted, it goes to the FDA's team for further evaluation of the submitted information. Following this, the FDA is also responsible to review the drug label that is provided to the FDA, in which case there may be interactions between the FDA and the sponsor to create the label. The label covers different pieces. Primarily, it covers what doses it should be administered at, the frequency of administration. It also would cover more detailed information about its safety, side effects, drug-drug interactions, and all of that. And you might actually have heard, when you go to your pharmacist and are getting, a medication for any that your physician has prescribed to you. Sometimes you might actually have an interaction with your pharmacist, and the pharmacist would tell you why you should not be having this drug with grapefruit juice, and or why you should not be using certain kind of medications. All that information is actually captured in the drug label, and that is the information that your pharmacist would be providing to you when you get your prescribed drug. So again, following the label, the FDA also gets to come to the facility where the drug is manufactured for inspection. Post all of this, the FDA would give an approval of the drug. Following that, the drug actually moves to the phase 4 of drug development. I mean, again, emphasizing here that an approval doesn't mean that we stop monitoring the safety of the drug. Once the approval is done and the drug moves to phase 4 of drug development, in which case in some cases, there could be a post-marketing requirement that the sponsor would have to collect some data and get back to the regulatory agency about. And or the sponsor is also required to frequently provide safety updates to the FDA. Another thing that the FDA has also created, which is helpful to the sponsor as well as the patients, is that there is a FDA MedWatch, wherein anyone who's either a prescriber or a user of that drug can report adverse drug reactions. Now, let's actually look at the whole totality of drug development and its timelines. Now, what I'm covering here is there are multiple things that are covered on this slide. One is we're looking at the various phases of drug development in one slide. We're also covering what are the various stages of drug development. And further down here, I'm actually giving you a glimpse of when an investigation new drug application is submitted, when a new drug application is submitted to the FDA. And I'm also covering what is the duration in terms of length of years. It's again a rough range, which is provided here at the bottom. And right here, you see this funnel-like shape. This actually covers what is the attrition that would take place throughout the drug development. So on an average, for one drug to get approved here by the FDA, the sponsor would generally start with about 5,000 to 10,000 drug candidates. Again, this is another reason and another discussion that you have routinely heard is the amount of time that and the cost of drug development. And we would even cover a little further, I would also give you a glimpse of why the drug development costs have increased over the number of years they have. Again, as you can see, that there is a huge attrition funnel starting from 5,000 to 10,000 drug candidates. Following that, when the drug reaches preclinical or animal testing, those are narrowed to about maybe 250 candidates. And this process takes about 3 to 6 years. Following the preclinical testing, once the safety of the drug has been established, the sponsor would submit an investigation new drug application to the FDA. Following the approval of the IND, the sponsor would move to the clinical testing of the drug. Phase 1, as we had mentioned, covered earlier, to phase 2 to phase 3. We already spoke about what are the main focus of the different phases of drug testing. Here we are looking at about 6 to 7 years, and also want to point out and mention that generally phase 1s are conducted in healthy volunteers. In specific cases, especially in case of oncology, a phase 1 trial is conducted in patients. So moving on to the NDA phase, again, once the sponsor has submitted the NDA application to the FDA, this takes anywhere, the approval process can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. At this stage, the sponsor is also looking at scaling up the manufacturing of the drug to meet the demand and or the expected need. Post this is the post-marketing surveillance phase, which could be an indefinite timeline. So now let's move on to giving a little bit more in depth on the various opportunities that the sponsor gets to interact with the FDA. The sponsor during the development phase can have a pre-IND interaction with the FDA. In the preclinical phase of drug development, the sponsor would have a pre-IND meeting with the FDA. Again, over the years, the FDA is strongly encouraging the sponsors to have as many frequent interactions as possible in order to first is ensure that the sponsor is heading in the right direction. Second is to ensure that that the safety and is taken into account, and the sponsor is also looking at, I would say, cutting edge technologies to support the drug development process. Again, here we are talking about when an IND application is submitted to the sponsor, the FDA takes about 30 days to review that application. Once approved, the sponsor moves to a phase 1. They could have an end of phase 1 meeting with the FDA. We already spoke about end of phase 2 meeting, which is a required meeting. And then at phase 3, the sponsor can have a pre-BLA meeting, BLA or an NDA meeting with the FDA. And of course, through the review process post an NDA application, the sponsor would have frequent meetings with the FDA, and post approval as well, the sponsor is recommended to have safety-related meetings with the FDA when needed. So now I'm actually going to be moving on to the expedited drug testing and approval process. Before I move on, I just wanted to take a quick check if there are any questions, anything that you would like clarifications on. If not, we can move on to the next slide. So in this slide, I'm actually presenting the latest data from the clinicaltrial.gov site. The FDA requires that any clinical trial that is being conducted in the United States, every clinical trial that is being conducted in the United States is captured by the clinicaltrial.gov site. And here we are actually looking at the number of clinical trials registered in the United States. And as you can see, just in the past 20 years, there has been an exponential increase in the total number of registered clinical trials. And this is also the reason why we actually see the increase in the drug development costs. And as you had seen, that funnel that the drugs would go through and the attrition rate is getting steeper and steeper. This is also because that the clinical trials are getting, first of all, they're getting very expensive. And the complexity of these clinical trials are also getting, higher and higher, which also means that there is an increase in the drug development timelines. And at the end, this would lead to making the cost of drugs more expensive. So now just let's look at what has the FDA put in place to support the sponsors to help with making the expedited drug testing and approval process more efficient. A sponsor can apply for any of these expedited testing and approval categories. So now